They say the Ottoman Empire was not shaken by armies or rebellions, but by a single wedding night. A night so forbidden, so impossible, that the palace chroniclers wrote it in half sentences, terrified to record the full truth. And at the center of that night stood a woman who was never meant to rise, a slave girl from the cold forests of Ruthenia, dragged in chains into the greatest empire on earth. She was born Alexandra, but the palace renamed her Hurrem, the Laughing One, a strange name for a girl stolen from everything she knew. Topkapi Palace swallowed her whole. It was a maze of silk and iron, a prison disguised as paradise. Thousands of women lived there, daughters of nobles, trained seductresses, political offerings, and all of them outranked her. But from the moment Hurrem entered the harem, something felt wrong to them. She didn't lower her eyes, she didn't shake. She didn't behave like prey. And that alone was dangerous. When Suleiman first saw her, the tension in the air shifted. She didn't beg for attention like the others. She simply looked at him, a look too confident for a slave, too fearless for a concubine. A look that made even the Sultan wonder who she had been before chains. That night he couldn't sleep. And that is how it began. Hurrem didn't seduce him with beauty. Many women had beauty. She seduced him with defiance, with intelligence, with a strange, unsettling joy that made her seem immune to palace fear. When the chief eunuch summoned her to the Sultan, she refused, the first woman in the empire to ever do so. Suleiman was furious, then fascinated, then enchanted. From that moment, the balance of the harem ruptured. Women who had spent their entire lives training to win the Sultan felt themselves overshadowed by a newcomer who didn't even try. The valid Sultan Suleiman's mother saw the shift and understood before anyone else. This girl was trouble. Not because she was seductive, but because she had power without position and confidence without protection. And in a palace built on hierarchy, that was poison. But Hurrem rose anyway. She bore Suleiman a son, then another. And another. Each child increased her influence. And each child increased the hatred in the harem. Poison was whispered about, spells, witchcraft, foreign charms. The more the Sultan loved her, the more enemies sharpened their knives. Yet she survived them all. And then something unimaginable happened, something that no Sultan had dared in centuries. Suleiman broke the law of the empire. He married her. A Sultan did not marry a concubine. A Sultan did not marry a slave. A Sultan did not let a single woman rule his heart. But Suleiman did. The wedding was performed in secret, behind locked doors, with no witnesses except shadows and fate. The palace waited outside in terrified silence. They knew that when the doors opened, the empire would not be the same. What happened inside that room remains the greatest mystery of the Ottoman court. Some said Hurrem told him a secret, something so devastating it forced him to rewrite the palace hierarchy. Others whispered she made him swear an oath, a private vow that shaped the future of their children. Some believed she confessed a prophecy or revealed a betrayal, or offered him a truth only she had the courage to speak. No one knows the words exchanged on that forbidden night. But everyone saw the consequences. The next morning, Suleiman emerged with eyes that looked like a man reborn, or a man burdened with a truth he could never undo. Orders flew through the palace. Hurrem became legal wife, Haseki Sultan. Rivals vanished, enemies were silenced. The harem's ancient laws were rewritten around her. Foreign ambassadors panicked, writing home that the Sultan had been bewitched. Viziers feared she would bend policy to her will. Even the common people whispered that the empire now had two rulers, one crowned, one veiled. From that night onward, nothing in the Ottoman Empire happened without Hurrem's shadow touching it. And the world began to understand the truth. An empire can withstand war. It can withstand famine, it can withstand betrayal, but it cannot withstand a love powerful enough to rewrite destiny. They say a wedding night can end a war or begin one. For the Ottoman Empire, it did both. After that forbidden night between Suleiman and Hurrem, Topkapi Palace stopped breathing. The corridors, once alive with gossip and footsteps, fell into a silence so deep it felt like the walls themselves were listening. Every servant, every eunuch, every concubine sensed it. Something irreversible had happened behind the Sultan's sealed doors. And outside, the world waited to see how one woman's presence would reshape an empire of millions. The morning after the wedding, the first sign appeared in the harem courtyard. The valid sultan, the woman who usually ruled the palace with an iron whisper, walked alone. Her face, once unreadable, now showed something rare, fear, because she understood better than anyone what Suleiman had done. By marrying Hurrem, he had severed centuries of imperial tradition. He had chosen love over politics, desire over dynasty. One woman over an empire, and the empire would not forgive him easily. Rumors spread like fire through silk. They say she bewitched him. They say she whispered to demons. They say she poisoned his mind. They say he sees no other woman now, but none of them knew Hurrem's true power. She needed no witchcraft. Her weapon was intelligence sharpened by suffering. While the palace tore itself apart with speculation, Hurrem remained calm. She moved through the halls with the serenity of a queen who had already foreseen every danger. She knew the moment she married the Sultan, she inherited not only his love, but all his enemies, and they were many. The first to strike was Mahidevran Suleiman's former favorite and the mother of his eldest son. Her fury burned hotter than the lamps of the harem. For years she had believed her son would inherit the throne, her lineage secure. But Hurrem's marriage changed everything. Now Hurrem's sons, her rivals, held higher claim. Mahidevran confronted her in the harem baths, the steam thick enough to blur faces but not intentions. No chronicler dared record their words, but every servant swore the marble walls heard the echo of something primal. Jealousy sharpened into threat. Hurrem left the baths with scratches on her face. Mahidevran left with her position broken. Suleiman summoned them both. But when he saw Hurrem's wounds, his decision was immediate. Mahidevran was exiled from the palace. And with a single punishment, the Sultan made something brutally clear. Hurrem was untouchable. Foreign ambassadors wrote to their kings in disbelief. Venice, Poland, France all panicked. Because they knew what this meant, Hurrem, a former slave, now influenced the politics of an empire stretching across 3 continents. But what terrified them more was something else, something subtle, invisible, and unstoppable. Suleiman began to echo Hurrem's ideas. He pushed reforms that echoed her sense of justice. He wrote poetry that dripped with her imagery. He strengthened alliances she favored. He silenced advisors she distrusted. For the first time in Ottoman history, the Sultan's heart had a voice, and that voice belonged to Hurrem. But the consequences were far from romantic. Jealous viziers plotted, ambitious governors whispered rebellion. The Janissaries, the empire's elite soldiers, grumbled in the barracks. They believed a sultan who listened to a woman could not be trusted with the fate of nations. Then came the darkest rumor of all, a rumor so powerful it nearly split the empire. Hurrem plans to put her sons on the throne, and the crown prince must die for that. It was whispered everywhere, in military camps, in marketplaces, in distant provinces. Whether she said it or not didn't matter. The rumor itself was enough to shift fate. Suleiman's eldest son, Mustafa, beloved by the army, adored by the people, became a threat to Hurrem's future. Some said she knew this and moved quietly, weaving influence like silk. Some believe she merely watched events unfold with a strategist's patience. But history agrees on one point: the wedding night that crowned her also began Mustafa's downfall. And within Topkapi's shadowed corridors, the fear was so thick it became a second atmosphere. Hurrem felt it every time she walked past guards who used to ignore her. She heard it in the footsteps following her at dusk. She sensed it in the letters that never reached her, intercepted by hands she could not see. Enemies waited for the slightest mistake, one wrong word, one wrong step, one moment of weakness, to destroy her. But the mistake never came. Hurrem learned the palace better than those born in it. She mastered diplomacy, poetry, politics, and the art of survival. But she also learned something far more important. Suleiman needed her not just as a wife, but as a mind. She became his advisor when he felt doubt, his comfort when he felt loss, his mirror when he faced decisions drenched in blood. And in the quietest hours, when the empire slept and only 2 lamps burned in the Sultan's chamber, they spoke not as ruler and consort, but as 2 souls bound by fate and fire. Those nights shaped policy, war, and history. Those nights forged alliances and broke kingdoms. Those nights made Hurrem not just a queen, but a legend. But every legend has a shadow. And the longer she sat beside Suleiman, the darker that shadow grew. The harem simmered with wrath. The palace corridors hummed with schemes. Faraway commanders saw in her rise the possibility of their own fall. Even Suleiman's own blood began to turn against him. All because on one forbidden night, he chose her. And though the empire would never admit it, the truth was simple. Hurrem's wedding night did not just change one woman's fate. It changed the destiny of the Ottoman Empire. They say every empire ends with a whisper long before it ends with a fall. And for the Ottoman Empire, that whisper was a woman's name, spoken in envy. In fear, in admiration, in hatred, in prayer, Hurrem, by the time the final chapter of her rise began, she was no longer the slave girl from the Ruthenian forests. She was no longer the concubine who defied the harem. She was no longer the forbidden bride who shattered palace law. She had become something far more dangerous, a woman whose survival meant doom for others. And the walls of Topkapi felt it. The empire was changing around her, tremoring beneath the weight of every decision she touched. Viziers who once spoke freely now measured every word. Ambassadors bowed more deeply than necessary. Eunuchs walked faster when they heard her laughter echoing through the halls, as if afraid the sound itself carried consequences. But her power, vast as it was, came with a price, one paid in bloodlines and shadows. The greatest threat was Suleiman's eldest son, Prince Mustafa, the golden heir, the warrior beloved by soldiers. The prince admired from the Balkans to Baghdad. The Janissaries adored him, seeing in him the rebirth of the empire's warrior past. The people whispered that he would be a better sultan than Suleiman himself. And this made him an enemy, not of Hurrem, but of the future she was building. No matter how much she smiled in public, how graceful her gestures, how soft her words, she knew one truth with the clarity of a dagger's edge. If Mustafa took the throne, her sons would die. It was tradition, it was law, it was the cost of succession. The moment Mustafa became sultan, every rival bloodline would end, beginning with Hurrem's children. She did not need to plot or poison or scheme to feel fear. The law itself was a blade hanging over her sons' necks. And so, her nights were no longer peaceful. Even in the sultan's chambers, lying beside the man who loved her, she heard whispers in the wind outside, imagined footsteps at the door, felt eyes watching through the lattice windows. Suleiman sensed it. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the shadows beneath her eyes, the quiet dread that crept into her voice. He began to doubt Mustafa too. Not because of Hurrem's words, she was far too clever for that, but because of the way fear twists the heart of even the greatest ruler. Whispers from distant governors, letters intercepted from military camps, half-true reports of rebellion, each thread wove into a tapestry of suspicion. And suspicion is the deadliest force in any empire. Meanwhile, Hurrem's influence in the palace reached heights no woman had touched. She built charities, schools, soup kitchens, foundations, winning the loyalty of the poor. She corresponded with foreign queens, earning their respect. She advised Suleiman on politics, making her presence felt across 3 continents. But in doing so, she became a symbol, not of love, not of power, but of change. And men fear change more than they fear death. One night, as a storm raged over Istanbul, lightning split the sky and thunder rolled across the Bosphorus. In the Sultan's private chamber, Hurrem and Suleiman sat alone. No servants, no guards, just 2 souls drowning in their own reflections. "You have made too many enemies," he said quietly. "And you have trusted too many friends," she replied. They understood each other without needing to elaborate. They knew a storm far greater than the one outside was approaching. Mustafa's popularity was swelling. The Janissaries were restless. Court politics had turned poisonous. War was inevitable. Not on the battlefield, but inside the palace walls, a war of lineage, of blood, of destiny. Months later, the empire trembled with the news. Prince Mustafa was dead, strangled on his father's orders. The earth itself seemed to shudder when the news reached Istanbul. Mothers wept. Janissaries roared in fury. poets wrote laments that still echo through Turkish history. And through it all, one name was whispered like a curse: Hurrem. Was she responsible? Did she plan it? Did she manipulate the Sultan? History cannot say. Some chroniclers insist she spoke nothing. Others swear she planted doubts like seeds in winter. Most agree she never needed to speak. The fear of losing everything spoke for her. But after Mustafa's death, a strange silence settled over Topkapi. Not relief, not triumph, something colder. Hurrem had won the future for her sons. But she had lost pieces of herself in the process. Her marriage had rewritten history. Her presence had reshaped politics. But power comes wrapped in the same chains she once wore. Her enemies had multiplied tenfold. The streets outside the palace carried her name like smoke. And even the marble floors of the harem seemed to hold their breath when she walked. And yet she did not break. She did not cower. She did not hide. She stood taller. Because she understood one truth better than any woman of her time. In empires built by men, only women who walk through fire earn the right to shape destiny. But destiny is greedy. It always demands the final word. As years passed, Hurrem's health dimmed like a candle burning to its base. The laughter the palace once feared grew softer. The walk that once commanded rooms became slower. Yet when she died, the empire shook again, not with drama, but with grief. Suleiman, the greatest sultan the empire had ever known, never recovered. He never remarried. He withdrew from the world, writing poems drenched in sorrow. And in those poems, a truth escaped. His heart had been buried long before his body. People say the empire began to decline after Hurrem's death, that she had been the force holding Suleiman's humanity together, the sharpness in his judgment, the fire in his resolve. Without her, the empire lost a piece of its soul. And so the legend stands: one woman arrived in chains and left the empire in chains of her own making. Not through magic, not through seduction, not through fear, through intelligence, through survival, through love, and a wedding night that changed history forever.